All right, are you ready?
Showtime synergy.
It was.
You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Because it was funny. I think, was it you that asked last week, or the conversation was something along the lines of like, if you could be a superhero, what would you be? Or what would your, and I said, Gem. I was like, Gem or Shira?
Oh, yeah. That was a while ago.
And I remember when I was younger, I had red star earrings. I was like, I just go be Gem.
Showtime synergy.
So
I think I just touch my earrings in general. It's like,
yeah. Yeah, that's true. You don't need the stars because the power is within you. It's not in what you wear.
That's such a fair thing to say. I'm rubbing off on you.
I know.
It only took, what, 12 years or so, right?
Baby steps. Show of hands. How many of us have some bad habits that we possess? None? I don't believe that at all. When we think about bad habits, though, usually we think about the external things, biting our nails, picking our nose, saying like or too much. But what the Stoics want us to focus on this week is our internal habits, the habits of the mind. We are Painted Porch Strategies. Thank you for joining us on the porch this week as we continue on our journey of 52 weeks through a handbook for new Stoics. I'm Amy Yakowski. I'm here with Rob Hunter and Sierra Ram-Cantrell, and we're so happy that you've decided to join us. We're all Stoics in training here, and this week, week 38, is another doozy as we progress on this discipline of ascent. And what the Stoics, what the teachers are asking us to look at this week are those habits of the mind. They talk about 4 moods of the mind, and they specifically cite Marcus Aurelius, one of our boys, how he's struggled with this often. So it's a little bit reassuring that, it's not just we in the modern world, that even the likes of Marcus Aurelius struggled with it. He talked about 4 specific moods or habits, talking about needless fancy, being antisocial, which we'll break down what that means a little bit more in a moment, not acting from your heart, and not forgiving yourself. Those are the 4 habits or things that are contrary to reason. So I'd like to, before we dive into each of these moods specifically, I wanted to first get some key takeaways from my porch team here, Rob and Sierra.
Oh, you're going to go to me first. This was a doozy. There is all kinds of scribbles and writing in my book this chapter. Yes, you too. The underlines, the scribbles. I wrote numbers. I wrote notes. I love to write exclamation points on things where I'm like, yes. This one was a lot of information, but I like how they outline for us about these 4 steps, because it helps break it down. And for me, it helps kind of give me some space from the bad habit. Because for me, when I first start thinking about my bad habit, I'm like, oh, I'm such a bad person. Oh, I got to get over it, blah, blah, blah. But this helps me kind of like separate and as Amy Yakowski likes to say, unpack.
I feel unpack like a business term.
Well, you're the one I learned from most. So it's your term. I know you didn't invent it, but Amy says, let's unpack that. And I feel like that's what they are setting us up, is they're helping me to unpack my bad habit. What about you, Rob? What did you think?
The big key here to being a Stoic is awareness. Be aware of your bad habits. Like, that's what this is. So we've been building right through these 38 weeks, little things at first. Now we're getting into the more complex. So now they're giving us 4 bad habits that Marcus Aurelius identified as things to be aware of, because your mind automatically does things. We talk a lot about that in these lessons, that our brains are hardwired to keep us alive. It's its number one job. So it takes all these lessons we've learned, all the interactions we've had with other people, and it kind of works on them and it stores them all away. So even things we can't remember, your brain remembers. And it's easy to fall into habits. So one of the examples that he talks about a lot is gossip, right? And Stoics were big on not trying to gossip, because it's something we all do. You hang out with your friends and you're talking about another friend who's not there, those are the kind of things like when you look at it, like, does that make me a good person to talk about so-and-so when they're not there? That was like my main takeaway for this is these things that for me, almost 43 years of training of years of life have taught me to do. Now it's trying to be aware of them so that I can go, oh, I'm not going to gossip about somebody.
And I think that's a great point when you think about your training. All of us have had many years, 40 plus, we're showing our age here. All of us have had 40 plus years of training in certain behaviors and habits. And we go to school and we learn how to read, how to write, how to, blow things up with experiments.
I would go to that
What
school.
school did you go to? You learned to blow things up.
We blew up marshmallows. I mean, that's not.
Why did you
There's
never
an
do that
after-school club.
here at the house?
Why don't I don't have one of those fancy vacuum things that you have in science class?
We're getting one.
Okay.
Hello, Amazon. Yeah.
That's a habit.
Yeah.
That's definitely a habit I have, a shopping habit. But when we think about these habits that we've developed, some of them have been learned through official teaching and some of them have been learned through informal teaching. And one of the things that I don't think, actually I know that we haven't been taught is those internal habits of the mind, how we think, how we process, how we experience, how we view the world, how we handle things emotionally. And that's where I think having something like joining us here on the Painted Porch, be it through these calls or through one of our programs, can be really critical because those are the pieces that we don't learn. That's the gap in our learning that something like Stoicism can definitely help you expand on or really refine and develop tighter than your circumstances up until now.
Because if you just let me just add something, if I can, when you are aware of these things, you can get your mental focus in the right places. And one of the things he talks about here is needlessly thinking about unnecessary things. So if you're thinking about something that's not going to make your day better, you go down this rabbit hole and you spend 2 hours thinking about something, you're wasting all this energy in your head, right? So if you say, oh, this is needless, I don't need to think about this, let me shift into something else. Because sometimes you can go down the rabbit hole of being negative, beat yourself up, because that's automatic in your brain. It's trying to keep you safe, keep you comfortable, keep you from moving on. So kind of just to add to your point, Amy, is the things that we do on Painted Porch Strategies through our programs and our coaching is to, number one, bring awareness through Sierra's Radical Mindfulness course, through my Master Your Message communication program, which is about human interaction, and then Amy's teamwork, which takes human interaction to that next level so you can exist together. The more you get rid of these with the techniques that we have for you, the more effective you are, the more efficient you are. And just quite honestly, the more stoic you are, the better a person you try to be every day.
Well, and I think I just want to add a point. It's not so much getting rid of, it's bringing awareness to, and there's a great quote. I'm not sure who says it, but when he talks specifically about Stoicism, he says it's not about the elimination of your emotions, it's the domestication of them. So it's learning how to take control, take the reins, take the leash, be the leash, not the dog, and being able to control what it is that's happening around you and how you are processing it.
Good point. So for example, if someone were to yell at you and you're like, if you're like, okay, I'm in control. So that person yelling at me doesn't impact me the way it used to when I was like 5 or something like that. Just a real world example. Sorry, Sierra, go please.
Well, and even though the three of us have very different strengths and different voices and techniques, all three of us firmly believe that each person is on a lifelong journey to learn and to grow. And just because you finish your schooling, your traditional schooling, does not mean that you are complete, perfect, set. Like, we believe in the ongoing working on the self. So that is a big reason why we created Painted Porch, was to give that opportunity for each person and each team to grow and to get better. Always room for improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So since we're talking about this growth journey, let's break down a little bit more these 4 moods of the mind, as they call them. Rob, you touched on that first one. The first one is needlessly thinking about unnecessary things. Don't dwell on what they call fancies, or what Marcus Aurelius called fancies. And basically they're saying, it can be both pleasure or pain. Don't dwell needlessly on it. Ask whether or not it's really necessary for you to dwell on it, and whether or not dwelling on this pleasure or this pain helps with your character, helps build it, brings it down. How is it impacting you? The second is antisocial behavior. And they don't mean like, lock yourself up in a room and be a hermit. That's part of it, right? But it's more so whether or not what you're doing is helpful to other members of this global tribe. That
like we're all a team.
We're all a team. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the idea of the circles and the various circles of people that It starts with your inner circle, and then it goes to more people that you're acquainted with, people that you don't know but maybe are in the same community as you, and then even taking it that one step further of the whole world, including the animals and little creatures that live within it. So that's when they talk about antisocial, it's whether or not what you're doing or saying is going to be harmful to what they would deem a harmonious life.
For example, gossip that we talked about a little bit earlier too. So, if you're talking poorly about someone, whether you know them or not, is that really contributing to the collaborative effort that human beings should be on together?
Mm-hmm. And granted, we talked about for many, many sessions and many months here, how it's not necessarily acquiescence. It's not, well, I'm just going to stay quiet because I don't want anybody to get upset. It's not that. It's more whether or not your behavior is hurting or helping when it comes to the overall
good way to really think about
harmony.
It. Is this hurting or helping?
Is this hurting or helping? So, number one, needlessly thinking about something. Is this beneficial to me or not? Is it really necessary? Number two, am I being antisocial? Basically, am I contributing to or constricting from the betterment of the people on my team? The third one is having insincere thoughts or actions. So do you really believe what you're saying or doing, or are you just saying it because you're bored, because you're just following the crowd, the mob, if you will, or is it for some sort of way to get a leg up? And that's the third one that they want to talk about. Is it insincere? Is your behavior or thoughts insincere? And then
which could be flattery or trolling, just think of those things in real world examples.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to compliment your boss, even though you didn't mean it, because you thought it might help you, you're like, oh, you're the greatest boss ever. And you're like in your head, like, oh my God, you're the worst boss ever.
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about.
Great job. Mm-hmm. And you're like, and that doesn't mean you're like, crappy job, but it's just finding a better way to say it than simply telling an outright lie, being insincere. And then the last one is giving in to physical urges. Don't do things that are contrary to reason. Your body naturally, Sierra, as you talk about a lot in radical mindfulness, your body is primitively programmed to react in certain ways in stressful situations, or when, your emotions are getting the better of you, right? And it's those handles that you can choose to pick up. So it's making sure that you are the leash, not the dog, and ensuring that you are not letting, if it was a dog, the dog being your emotions run you down the street and into traffic, right? Or doing something that you're going to eventually regret, not acting mindlessly.
Yes. And Marcus Aurelius says these are the four most common issues likely to slow down our philosophical progress.
Yes.
And it's a good idea to look out for them in the course of your practice, which, as I mentioned, is a lifelong practice.
Yes.
What I love about these lessons too is if you follow religion, it's the same. They're the same lessons often, right? And this is kind of the basis of really, I think, good philosophy. I mean, these Aristotle, Plato, then you have Stoicism, and then you branch off into different religions that essentially teach you the same things on how to go through life and learn lessons and try to be a better person for everybody, not just for you and your own advancement.
Right. But obviously the difference between religion and philosophy is that religion, as we talked about a few weeks back, at least the way they look at it, they're set rules. They're thou shalt not do this, thou shalt do this. Now mixed within that, there are all of these parables, these lessons,
Yes.
right? That
So if you
help
read the
guide
books,
help guide you along this path. Philosophy is more that guide. It's that guidance. It's thinking about if you want to go from Florida to Maine, right? There's many different routes you can take, and along that route, you can intentionally take side trips, or you may get detoured along that way. But it's setting that guide point, that post that you want to aim towards, but recognizing that life is lived in the gray, as you like to say a lot, Rob. There's going to be variations of how you get there, but it's more so long as you have that compass to help guide you. You need to go north.
Yeah.
So in this week's exercise specifically, so they introduce the concept. This one was pretty beefy. What they wanted us to do was to think about, which of the four, needlessly thinking about unnecessary things, having antisocial, or we'll say unproductive thoughts or impulses, having insincere thoughts or actions, and then giving into physical urges. They wanted us to identify one or more that we thought were the most relevant to us. So, Sierra, which of them, be it one or more, did you identify?
So for me, they're kind of mixed together, but I would say number one, needlessly thinking about unnecessary things mixed with my physical urges to that reaction of those things. So for me, the thing I was tackling, just in the broadest sense of the term, is that I tend to like to have a plan for like what's going to happen. And over again, especially recently, those plans have been disrupted by plans either being changed or people not having a plan. And my first instinct is that I'm jarred by that and I'm upset by that because I like the plan, I'll be honest. But it's an opportunity for me to look at that and say, do I really need to be that attached to the plan? Because the plan has to change. I've got to learn to ebb and flow with that. So, Amy, what about you?
Mine was the exact same. Those were the two I circled, and I recognized the correlation between them and how tightly coupled they were. Thinking about things and then giving in to those physical sensations or urges as a result of those thoughts. Those are the ones that tend to really get me.
Yeah.
And for me, my specific circumstance was this feeling of anxiety or overwhelm. And it just becomes like this vicious cycle where I get in this feedback loop that is not a healthy feedback loop. It just constantly feeds itself. So those were the ones that I really struggled with. How about you, Rob?
all four.
All four. Woo, you bit off a lot.
Well, but it's true. I mean, I know that they're there, so I'd just rather confront them all at once and just, okay, thankfully I keep myself super busy, so I don't think about needless things a lot, but I still do it. It's natural, right? You see that Maserati and you're like, ooh, I wish I could drive a Maserati. What would it be like to drive a Maserati? And you go down that path, then you're like, wait a second, I have a car, does the same thing a Maserati does. I'm fine. Plus my car's blue. That's pretty cool. But it's really, for me, the biggest thing is the anti-social thoughts or impulses. My day job is a talk show host. So it becomes very easy to go down this political road where good guys versus bad guys.
Blame game.
Yeah, and calling people names and all these other things, because it's just part of the media culture. And I struggle with ways to try to not do that while I'm talking on the air. So that is a constant struggle that I have every single day, or at least 5 days a week, in trying to put a positive foot out there in the world rather than a negative one. So that's the one that I try to battle every single day and try to come up with ways that challenge my mind and push me to be creative in how I approach things and share ideas, not to just destruct other people.
Well, and I think this goes back to Sierra. Now, as you mentioned this, Rob, it makes me think about one of your leaders, who you've worked with in the past, as well as a concept that they talk about a lot at the beginning of these Stoic lessons, which is hard on the issue, soft on the person. And to look at it from a Stoic perspective, a person is not good or bad. A behavior may be good or bad, or even then that's, up to interpretation, but it's
Or
not
an
the
outcome.
person. Yes,
Yes.
the person is not their behavior. The behavior is the behavior. Yes. And so I think that that's key when I think about with you, Rob, especially in talk radio. It's so easy to criticize the person for what, they said or didn't say or how they're behaving. But it's really, and it's a small difference, but I think it's a small shift, but it can make a significant difference when you focus less on who, but on what's their motivation, understanding and being able to speak to the action versus the individual, I think is key, because you can still be, I'll say, critical of it, but critical from a here's why, and possibly presenting a better solution to the matter at hand.
Easier said than done, but that's why it's a habit.
Great. Again,
Yeah.
40 plus years of learning how to talk about people and about situations a certain way, and
well,
trying to reprogram.
20 years of media training, 22
years
plus years. It's a challenge, and then you get criticized too because you share an opinion someone doesn't agree with. So it's like this vicious cycle, which is so interesting too. And that the several people that I know have talked about, like, I don't pay attention to the news anymore, and my quality of life has improved dramatically because unfortunately, it's a tear down culture where everything has to be a problem. I get news alerts on my phone. I'm sure if I went through them right now and I looked at how many of them are this person's awful or whatever, it's always there in your face. So that a huge hurdle to sometimes jump over.
So knowing that we cannot inflict change on other people, knowing that we only have control over ourselves and how we act and react, they asked us to first identify which 4 or more of these that we wanted to work on this week. And they wanted us to come up with an implementation intention for the moods that we want to tackle. So Amy, what did you come up with for your implementation intention?
Yep. So I came up with 2, since I identified 2 things, but they are related to each other. I said, whenever I feel the tinge of overwhelm, I'll remind myself that it can and will get done. I just need to plan it out and then not think about it. And then from there, I said, whenever I feel this tinge of overwhelm, I will pause and not let that feeling of overwhelm derail my progress or plans. Because sometimes what often happens with me, I'm a dichotomy of myself in my behaviors. Whereas if I become overwhelmed, I become paralyzed. Just like if I worry about money, I spend money. Like it's this weird behavior with me. But when I become overwhelmed, I freeze and I do nothing and I retreat away, and then just the things keep piling up, right? Nothing gets addressed. So for me, that's my physical reaction to that thought, that emotion that I'm experiencing, that needless overthinking of things. How about you, Sierra?
So since the thing I was tackling, we picked the same too, Amy, because Amy and I are parallel in some ways and opposites in other ways. It's quite fast. So I kind of had 2. So when I felt frustration at other people for either them changing the plan or them not having a plan, I said I needed to allow each person to have their own journey, their own path. And then when it had to do with my reaction, my feelings of being able to let go of the original plan, I said, I can flow. I will flow.
Ooh, I like that.
Allows me to, and I think of one of my favorite songs right now is Taylor Swift, Willow. So a willow can kind of gracefully bend with the wind instead of being so rigid that it will break with the wind. So I kind of picture a willow branch and how I just have to be able to kind of flow with the wind.
Ooh, I like that. I like that visualization too. That's good, because that connects both with the mind and the body when you think about that flow.
And sometimes I even do this little willow dance.
I like it. Maybe you need to have like a 10-second clip of it just at the ready on your phone all the time. So you just, it's like your momentary. It's like
Writing
your
that down.
emergency button. You just like, I gotta flow. I gotta flow. How about you?
Now, Rob, what was your implementation? Because you took on all four. What did you decide to tell yourself?
It's going to come down to a very simple question. What would Marcus do? That's what I'm going to ask myself. What would Marcus do?
Ooh, that's good.
And try to think about it. Because I think about Marcus Aurelius. The reason why I like him so much is because oftentimes people get in positions of power and they exercise all of their power that's at their disposal. And at least the way we read history is that Marcus showed tons of restraint. And I think that is the key to being a Stoic is you have power to tear down other people, but you don't have to use it. It's like the example of free speech that I'll use. It's one of my favorite things that we have in this country, the right to speak freely. But that's also doesn't mean that you should use it all the time to call people names or say bad things about people. So it is exercising restraint. And I think that that is going to be the answer to what would Marcus do. He would exercise restraint on his freedoms, on his power, but he would also exercise restraint on his own habits and his own things in his head. So I think that that is kind of what my implementation is going to be going forward.
I like that. I have two quick quotes that I'm going to add that I think tie perfectly into this. The first one is, the thought that power corrupts. And I recently read that someone said, no, it's not that power corrupts, power reveals. Power reveals who you truly are as an individual. And then my second one is tied to that, just from Spider-Man, one of my favorites, is that when thinking like the right to free speech, freedom. So with great power comes great responsibility. And I think the same thing is true when it comes to freedom. With great freedom comes great responsibility. It's not just that you're free to do something, but it's also the responsibility of doing it in the most virtuous way, which the Stoics tried to create that guidepost, that compass for us to aim towards.
That's why I do say this on my show quite a bit, is that freedom is amazing, but it also means you should not harm others, whether that's verbally, physically. You should not violate their civil rights. I like to say aim not to harm and aim not to be harmed. So whatever, I like those because again, it's showcasing restraint. I am free to do this, but that doesn't mean I necessarily can, should, or want to.
Right.
And even if I want to, can I restrain from doing that?
So much to think about here on the
Club and here in Painting Porch Strategies. We want to get deep with you, though. This is what we live for. We love this. It's like retraining. It's amazing.
And so with this lesson, again, it was a big one. It's a hefty one. They also wanted us to try to keep tabs on when we bumped into these sensations, these moods when they hit us. I will fully admit right out the gate that I was not very good with noticing it. I in looking back on it, my tally was not very high because I wasn't intentionally focusing on it as much as I should have. So this is one that I specifically said, you know what, I want to revisit this one again and repeatedly, because I think it's one that is going to be helpful, just like all of these other lessons. But one of the things that I specifically wrote here as like a final reflection on this lesson is that, I think that each week they're giving us new things to do. And each week almost seems to have more implementation intentions. And there can be times where it feels overwhelming because you want to do all of them. You're like, well, I need to be doing this, and I need to be doing this, and I need to be doing this. I need to remind myself of this, and remind myself of this. And it can, just like what I talked about, it can feel overwhelming, or you feel like you're not doing enough. And so one of the things that I noted as a takeaway is what I'd like to do is, once we're complete with our 52 weeks, which is coming up soon, I would actually like to go back and pick one implementation intention and focus on that for a month. Because I
Oh
think
yeah.
through doing that, because right now, every week is another really good one to focus on. But this intention is not, you're cured in a year. You do this in a year and you're done. As Meditations and Marcus Aurelius, it was an ongoing practice. He was constantly revisiting and reminding himself. But I thinking for me, at least personally, picking a theme, like a monthly theme, and focusing on that, because if not, it can seem like I need to be doing I need to do 52 implementation intentions a day so I can be a good Stoic. But that is, number one, almost impossible, but it's extremely overwhelming. And all you'll be doing is thinking and not actually, doing anything at all.
Well, also, I believe that this is a lot of here's a lot of the textbook, but then life is, like Ferris Bueller says, life comes at you fast. Like these things are going to come at you, not necessarily in the same order as this book. So this is kind of like some of the prep work where they're teaching us the exercises so that when these things fly at you, you're like, I remember this chapter, blah, blah, blah. Aha, right? I remember this, and let me check that. Oh yeah, okay. So it's like you can recognize it when that shit hits the fan, because it's gonna hit the fan just in lots of different ways. You're gonna be more ready for it. It's that recognition, like Rob says, and it's the implementation intention, and it's working with it and knowing that, you know what, none of us are perfect. None of us ever will be perfect. It's always the hey, can you go that
Just
other
like
way?
that.
Thanks. Just like that. Things happen, right?
Yeah.
So it's a constant journey for us, and to think that any one of us are ever complete, it's not. Yes. Lost my thought.
That's why it's fun.
Wise words.
That's why it's fun. That's why life is fun.
It's a practice.
Who wants to get stuck in the same cycle for 40 years? I mean, that's the whole point of living, is it's a journey.
Yes.
A Stoic journey.
A Stoic journey.
See, we're going to have our interruption.
Our robot vacuum is going to happen here in a minute.
Oh. I think the clock on the wall is trying to tell us to wrap it up.
Yes, exactly. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us this week and any previous weeks. We would love to have you continue to join us on the porch and participate, whether just simply through comments in the videos below or by signing up for our virtual book club, where we have a little bit more of a community of Stoics in training, where we all kind of connect.
Come say hi.
Come say hi. Yes, come join us on the porch. We love to have challenging conversations, but conversations that can help each one of us grow, expand, and help us lead a more virtuous life together with a little bit of support. On that note, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here on the porch. And we hope to see you again next week, where we have week 39, talking about keeping basic Stoic concepts always at hand. Huh. Imagine that! It's like I knew that by week 38, we would be like, okay, this is a lot of stuff that I have to keep track of. So apparently they're going to give us some basics that we can keep at hand all the time to help us on our journey. So for Rob, for Sierra, I'm Amy Yakowski. This is Painted Porch Strategies. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.